The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Thank you for the honor of praying with you and for you today. Words of the Holy Father, Pope Francis, a leader who does not love cannot govern. At best they can discipline. They can give a little bit of order, but they can't govern. You can't govern without loving the people and without humility. And every man, every woman who has to take up the service of government must ask themselves two questions. Do I love my people in order to serve them better? Am I humble? And do I listen to everybody, to diverse opinions, in order to choose the best path? If you don't ask those questions, your governance will not be good. The man or woman who governs, who loves his people, is a humble man or woman. God our Father, we invite you to be present with us here today in this chamber, that we might learn from you how to love your people and to direct them to what is truly good. May these your sons and daughters who have been given the awesome privilege of holding public office through the sacred trust of the people seek the common good with a posture of humility before you and one another. Permit them to accomplish more together than they could ever do on their own. Enlighten their understanding and open them to your inspiration. May they lay their strengths, weaknesses, and even their disagreements before you for the cause of establishing right order and justice among the people of this state. May all bitterness, evil, and division be cast far from this place, and anoint them with the spirit of charity, so that sincerity, goodwill, righteousness, and peace animate their deliberations. Give them courage for the mission of upholding human dignity and true freedom. May they govern the kingdom on this part of the earth according to your design, so that it prepares your people for your eternal kingdom in heaven. Amen.
Our chaplain for today is the Reverend John Kelly, St. John Vianney Seminary, the University of St. Thomas. Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. Yes. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. For what purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Speaker, point of personal privilege.
You point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker and members, today in the chamber I am joined by a group of very smart young constituents from Carver County. This is the Watertown Mayor mock trial team who actually went to state in mock trial, and they came down here to join me today. So give them a round of applause.
For what purpose does the gentleman rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a point of personal privilege.
Please state your point of personal privilege. The gentleman from Hennepin.
Mr. Speaker and members, we have some guests from Israel on the House floor, and they are here as part of an exchange program, a community service exchange program, sponsored by the St. Paul Jewish Federation and Jewish Community Action. And I'm just going to introduce the four of them by name. They're from the town of Tiberias, which is next to the Sea of Galilee. Many of you probably know about that. And so we have Devorah Arkind, Yehudit Dayan, Tal Markovich, and Gilly Sella. Please give them a warm Minnesota welcome.
Representative Anderson.
Mr. Speaker,
for what purpose does the gentleman rise?
Point of personal privilege.
Please state your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker, during this time of high school and NCAA basketball, I'd be remiss not to point out to the body that the Melrose Dutchmen captured the state Class 2A boys basketball championship over the past weekend. It was the Dutchmen's third championship in boys basketball, and their first since back in 1974 when a young fellow named Mark Oberding played for Melrose. So join me in saying congratulations to the Melrose area Dutchmen.
The clerk will read the journal from the preceding day.
Journal of the House, 89th session, 30th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Wednesday, March 18th, 2015.
If there is no objection, further reading of the journal will be dispensed with, and the journal will be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the journal is approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there is no objection, the reports will be adopted. Hearing no objection, the reports are adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading House File number 323.
Second reading.
Second reading House File number 546.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 783.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 834.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 954.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1047.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1109.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1135.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1461.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1556.
Second reading.
Second reading House File 1772.
Second reading. Introduction of bills. The following House files have been offered for introduction today. The chief clerk will report the House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House Files 2017 through 2056.
First reading House Files 2017 through 2056. Calendar for the day. Okay. First bill on the calendar for the day is House File 841. The clerk will report the bill.
House File Number 841, number 1 on the calendar for the day, an act relating to higher education, second engrossment.
There are amendments at the desk. If there is no objection, we will let the author explain the bill before we act on the amendments. To the bill, Representative Dettmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure you're not surprised that I have a veterans bill that also includes higher education. House File 841 amends the definition of residence. Mr. Speaker, could I have the attention of the floor? Thank you. House File 841 amends the definition of resident students, including all individuals who are active members of the National Guard or the Reserve component, Army Reserve, Naval Reserve, etc., and who reside in the state of Minnesota and are active members of those components. This change would make all resident National Guard Reserve components eligible for the following Office of Higher Education grants and scholarship programs. The State Grant Program, which provides grants for the undergraduate students based on financial need. The Child Care Grant Program that provides grants for students to help over cost of child care. And also the Indian Scholarship Program provides scholarships to students with at least 1/4 Indian ancestry and qualify for the Pell Grants. With that, Mr. Speaker, I know there's some two friendly amendments that I would like to take on.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Purcell moves to amend House File Number 841, the second engrossment as follows, and the amendment is coded A5.
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in talking with Representative Dettmer on this amendment, and it's very simple, just ensuring that we're extending to spouses and dependents of that member, and this will be on Section 10 of the bill. That we're just adding, we're adding in two places, member or spouse or dependent of that member, and it mirrors the language that is in the bill in Subdivision 8 that you find under resident students. So, thank you, Representative Dettmer, for working with me on this, and it's a good amendment to vote for.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Dettmer.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Purcell, for bringing this forward. I accept that as a friendly amendment, and please vote green on that amendment.
Further discussion to the Purcell amendment. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. The amendment is adopted. There is an amendment at the desk.
Murphy M. moves to amend House File Number 841, the second engrossment as amended as follows, and the amendment is coded A4.
The lady from St. Louis, Representative Murphy M.
Mr. Chair, I move adoption of the amendment, and I understand Representative Dettmer has an amendment to my amendment.
Representative Dettmer, there is an amendment to the amendment. The clerk will report the amendment to the amendment.
Dettmer moves to amend the Murphy M. amendment to House File 841, the second engrossment as amended as follows, and the amendment is coded A6.
Representative Dettmer, to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Murphy and Representative Kahn and I, we met with Military Affairs and also the Commissioner of Veterans Affairs, and we felt it's best to have this under the language under the Department of Military Affairs. Thank you. I accept this.
Is there any discussion to the amendment to the Murphy M. amendment? Hearing or seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Now to the amendment as amendment. The lady from St. Louis, Representative Murphy M.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The amendment's exactly the way it should be. and so I urge everyone to vote yes.
Any further discussion on the Murphy Amendment as amended?
You'll get one.
Hearing or seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. The motion prevails. The amendment as amended is added to the bill. So now we have the bill as amended. Discussion. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 841, as amended.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill as amended. The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the author yield for a question?
The author will yield. The gentleman from Hennepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering how much more cost we have added to the bill with these several amendments that have gone on here. It seems to me we've greatly expanded this bill, and is there any, do we have an open and standing appropriation for this, or how are we going to pay for it?
The gentleman from Washington. The gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative, the fiscal note that came back was zero because the money is already in those accounts. What happens here is that these people already qualify for these, but they don't have to wait 12 months now to apply for them. And some of them might not even apply for the grants.
The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I thought I had seen by one of these amendments, unless it didn't go on, was that we're adding a spouse and dependents and so forth. Am I misreading it?
Are you asking the gentleman from Washington to yield? He will yield. The gentleman from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative, if you look at the bill, the spouse and also the line 1.21, they're also already mentioned in the bill, but now they just don't have to wait for 12 months.
The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Earhart.
Thank you.
The gentleman from Otter Tail, Chairman Nornes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just rise to support this legislation that Representative Dettmer has brought to us today. I think it makes a lot of sense to do that. And again, it comes out of the state grant program, I believe. So, and I don't believe that it's going to affect that many people that it's going to make that much difference, but it is making a difference to those that are involved. Thank you very much.
The gentleman from Sherburne, Chair Knobloch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Earhart, first of all, I do support the bill also and encourage members to vote for it. But beyond that, my understanding of the state grant program is that it's a fixed amount of money. And so to the extent there were a few additional people that were added, A, it wouldn't be very much, but B, it would really be absorbed within the total state grant program. It wouldn't increase the amount of the program.
Oh, yeah, that's in there.
Further discussion on the bill as amended. Further discussion. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. Hamilton votes aye. There being 130 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to. The report from the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Peppin for the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration, pursuant to Rules 1.21 and 3.33, designates the following bills to be placed on the calendar for the day from Monday, March 23, 2015, and establishes a pre-filing requirement for amendments offered to the following bills. House File Number 889 and 1027.
Motions and resolutions. There are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we will take action on the motions first. Hearing no objections, the motions prevail. Announcements. Oh, excuse me.
Dean M. moves that House File Number 1001 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Reform and be referred to the Committee on Taxes.
Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a bill that deals with exemption for residency exemption for medical treatment in Minnesota. It's currently in the Health Reform Committee and going to the Tax Committee. I've talked to both chairs. They both very much want the bill, but I went with seniority, and you get the bill, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker?
The gentleman from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
So this bill is moving out of health reform and to taxes, just to clarify?
The gentleman will yield. Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Thiessen, the bill is a tax exemption. It should have gone to the Tax Committee. It was incorrectly sent to the Health Reform Committee. It's in the committee that it currently belongs, along with several other tax exemptions for residency. So it will be heard with a bundle of similar bills in Representative David's committee.
The gentleman from Hennepin. The lady from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And would Representative Dean yield to a question?
The gentleman from Washington will yield. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dean, is it your intention that this bill would come back to HHS reform? Because looking at the bill, I think this could have impacts on health care. It certainly involves health care. It could have impacts on the health of Minnesotans, or at least people who now consider themselves Minnesotans, or might in the future consider themselves Minnesotans. And it also might have impact on Minnesota's medical institutions. So I hope that it would be your intention that this bill would actually be heard in HHS reform. Could you let us know what your intention is with this, please?
The gentleman from Washington, Chair Dean.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Liebling, it's very similar to the other exemption bills that we've seen in Representative David's committee. That's, I think, the appropriate place for it right now, and I haven't thought about it beyond that.
Representative Liebling.
Well, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Dean, I'm really thinking that this should come to HHS reform. We are at deadline week. There is time to have this heard. We have a hearing in HHS reform tomorrow, and there's plenty of time to have it heard in the Tax Committee. The Tax Committee, I believe, has a longer deadline, and so, members, I would ask you to oppose the motion. I think that regardless of what other bills are doing, I think this bill that clearly refers to health institutions in Minnesota, and as I said, probably impacts the health of Minnesotans and impacts our healthcare institutions in Minnesota, probably needs to have a hearing. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask members to oppose the motion, and I would ask for a roll call.
Roll call having been requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Further discussion? The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 70 yeas and 58 nays, the motion prevails.
Seltzer moves that House File number 1542 be recalled from the Committee on Education, Innovation, Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Education, Finance.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Seltzer, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Since we've discovered that this education bill has a fiscal note, I have spoken with both chairs and we agree that it should be moved to Education Finance. So I hope members will agree.
Any discussion on the Seltzer motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the Seltzer motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Considine moves that House File number 1669 be recalled from the Committee on Transportation Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine, to your motion.
I'd like to have Mr. Speaker, I'd like to have 1669 moved from the Committee on Transportation and Policy and Finance to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Privacy. I have spoken to both chairs and they've both agreed.
Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Simonson moved that House File number 1940 be recalled from the Committee on Education, Innovation, Policy and be re-referred to the Committee on Public Safety and Crime Prevention, Policy and Finance.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Simonson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. That is my motion. House File 1940 is a bill that deals with expanding the trespass crime to include trespassing on a school bus. I know that both chairs have been spoken to, and we all agree that public safety is a more appropriate first stop for this bill, so I encourage your support.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the Simonson motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Erickson moves that House File number 44 be returned to its author.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd like House File 44 returned to me because there was a drafting error, and since that introduction, which was early on, I've had a new bill drafted and heard in committee. Thank you.
Any discussion on the Erickson motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Erickson moves that House File number 297 be returned to its author.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is a Bill 297 that the County Commissioners in Mille Lacs County would like to return to me because they are not going to pursue this change and would rather not have it open for movement. Thank you.
Any discussion on the Erickson motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Erickson moves that House File number 1388 be returned to its author.
The member from Mille Lacs, Representative Erickson, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Again, this bill was drafted incorrectly, and I'd like it returned to me. Thank you.
Any discussion on the Erickson motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the Erickson motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Loon moves that House File number 328 be recalled from the Committee on Job Growth and Energy Affordability Policy and Finance and be re-referred to the Committee on Civil Law and Data Practices.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Loon, to your motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I think this was just a technical glitch that occurred when I was heard in government ops yesterday. The motion was to send it to civil law. We do have an issue, and I think they're planning to maybe hear the bill tonight, so before it then moves to jobs. So we need to make sure that the bill is traveling in the proper order. That is my motion.
Any discussion on the Loon motion?
And the chair is fine with it.
Any discussion on the Loon motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the Loon motion signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails.
Thiessen moves to amend the permanent rules of the House for the 2015-21-16 session as follows. Rule 4.04, floor adoption of budget resolution.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This original amendment relates to the budget resolution, and in the past, members, the budget resolution has come to the floor for a vote by the entire body, not just by the Ways and Means Committee. In fact, it was during Representative Knobloch's time formally as chair of the Ways and Means Committee from 2003 to 2006. That's how we operated here in the House, and it was subsequently changed. Recently, Representative Knobloch said in an interview that he prefers having the budget resolution coming to the floor for a vote of the House over the procedure that we have now. And I think the one thing that we ought to do is respect the wishes and thoughts of the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And that's particularly true, as we're seeing the lack of information coming from the majority, hearing that we're going to give all the money back and then some, that we're going to give half the money back, that we're going to give a vast majority of the money back, that we're going to give a substantial amount of the money back, and also that we're going to spend loads and loads of money in our budget. So I think that we should take Representative Knobloch up on on what he believes is the right thing to do, and vote to have the budget resolution pass out of Ways and Means and then come to the House floor for a vote. And why it's important, members, and I'd like a roll call on this if I could, Mr. Speaker.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
And why I think that it's important that we do this, members, is, especially for the first-term members who haven't been here, and second-term members who haven't been through this very often. When the budget resolution is set by the high-ranking senior members of both caucuses in the Ways and Means Committee, you really don't have a chance to weigh in. You don't have a chance to talk about what you think are the priorities, the spending priorities for the state, because once that budget resolution is locked in, that's it. That's what's going to govern our debates over how much we should spend on education, how much tax cuts we should make, how much we're going to spend on health and human services. So by adopting this motion and amending our rules to allow that to come to the floor, it'll allow all of us in the House to weigh in on what our priorities should be, what our budget target should look like, and I think that's really important. I do have an amendment to the amendment as well, Mr. Speaker.
There is an amendment to this motion at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Knobloch, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, under Rule 3.12, I would make a motion that the Thiessen amendment to the rules be laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker.
One moment.
And I'd ask for a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is in order.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Thiessen, state your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, when an amendment to an amendment has been offered and reported by the Speaker to be called up, then the motion to lay the underlying motion on the table is not in order. And correct me if I'm wrong, until the amendment is actually taken up, and you had already asked the clerk to report the amendment to the amendment. So I think Representative Knobloch's motion is not in order, but that's, I guess, my parliamentary inquiry.
He was in the process of reporting the amendment, but it had not been completed yet, so the amendment had not yet been reported. Discussion on the motion.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
State your point of order, Representative Thiessen.
What is that? I guess it's under 3.12. Well, no, it's not under 3.12. Mr. Speaker, the point of order would be under Mason's and our rules that when an amendment to an amendment has been reported, and you mentioned that he was already in the process of doing that, that the underlying the motion to table the underlying amendment is not in order, and I'm going to rise to that point of order because I do think that the chief clerk was in the process of reporting the amendment to the amendment. So we had already moved on to that order of business, and it would be improper to allow this motion to go forward under those circumstances. And I'd like a roll call on that.
Are you citing a ruling?
I'm calling a point of order. Yes. I'm asking. Yes.
Are you citing a rule?
Mason's custom and usage.
Representative Thiessen, as I had said, I had really already kind of ruled on this one, which was that process had not been completed. So my ruling was that the amendment had not yet been offered.
Point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Is it proper for a member to rise to a motion when the clerk is in the middle of another order of business, like reporting an amendment?
I did recognize Representative Knobloch, so he did have the floor at that time.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
You've already acknowledged you'll recognize Representative Knobloch while the clerk was already reporting the amendment because Representative Knobloch interrupted that process. So my question again is, when the clerk is in the process of reporting amendment, when we're on other business, is it proper to recognize another member to make a motion?
I did recognize Representative Knobloch. He did have the floor at that time, and I have ruled that that is in order.
Mr. Speaker, a point of parliamentary inquiry because you didn't answer my question.
I have answered your question, Representative.
Mr. Speaker, my point of parliamentary inquiry is when the clerk is in, I know that you recognize Representative Knobloch. That's not what my question is. My question is, when the clerk is in the process of reporting an amendment to amendment, which is another order of business, is it proper to recognize another member, not to rise for a point of order, but to rise to make a motion? And I don't believe that it is proper to interrupt the clerk at that point.
Representative Thiessen, I'm ruling that your point of order is not well taken.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't on a point of order. You had already ruled on the point of order. I was on a parliamentary inquiry.
I have not ruled on the point of order, and I have not recognized you, Representative Thiessen. I just ruled on the point of order right now.
Mr. Speaker,
for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, parliamentary inquiry.
State your point of parliamentary inquiry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You had ruled on the point of order when you found it not well founded before, and that's why I was rising to a point of parliamentary inquiry. And my point of parliamentary inquiry, again, is it appropriate for a member, when the clerk is in the process of reporting another order of business, to rise to make a motion? Is that a higher order of business? I don't believe it's a higher order of business.
Representative Thiessen, when Representative Knobloch rose, I did recognize him. At that point, the process that was in process had stopped, and we do believe that's appropriate. Before the body right now is a motion to lay this motion on the table. That is not debatable, although, and there is a roll call on that motion. The clerk will take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry. Mr. Speaker, point of parliamentary inquiry. You said that when you're in process, it's okay to interrupt, Mr. Speaker. I have a point of parliamentary inquiry, and I was standing to be recognized.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 4 nays, the motion does prevail, and the Thiessen motion to amend the rules is laid on the table.
Newton moved that the rules of the House be so far suspended that House File Number 564 be recalled from the Committee on Health and Human Services Finance, be given its second and third readings, and be placed upon its final passage.
To your motion, the member from Anoka, Representative Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask a roll call first.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As members know, last year on the House floor, several times, Representative Hamilton got up and spoke very eloquently and very passionately about the need for a 5% increase for those people who are caring for the most vulnerable among our society. He supported my bill. This year I'm co-authoring his bill, and I would like to ask, Mr. Speaker, that we bring the bill to the floor, have a vote on it, and move ahead. I know that with some 20 authors on the Republican side and virtually everyone on this side, and I think everyone on this side of the aisle, is in support of the bill, we have the votes to move this bill forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Members, this is a motion to suspend the rules. It does require 90 votes. Discussion on the motion. Oh. The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Newton. This is like deja vu. You know, this is fun. We just switched positions. Members, I really support this bill. I guess I've been pretty passionate about this, and Representative Newton has as well. We've been working very, very close together in order to get this accomplished. It is working its way through the process, and I ask that we respect that here, and I look forward to everybody supporting this along the way. Thank you.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Well, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I would ask people to vote against the motion to suspend the rules. You know, one of my concerns is that if we bring this forward all alone, you've got less chance of it becoming law than if it's actually part of the omnibus bill. And so, members, I think it's appropriate this is really part of the full Finance Committee discussion, and that we reject the effort to suspend the rules.
The member from Blue Earth, Representative Considine.
Mr. Speaker, one of my biggest disappointments so far in the legislature has been that I was not able to get on as a co-author Representative Hamilton's bill. I strongly support it. It appears that there are enough people to go forward. They told me there was too many people on it already. So I'd really like to support his bill, and I'd like to go ahead and make the commitment to do so now.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and thank you, Representative Newton, for bringing this forward. It is awfully important, and as a member of the Health and Human Services Finance Division, along with my colleagues, we have started now to hear a number of proposals coming through that committee that are, going to put a lot of pressure on our budget, and they are, of course, things that are really important. I know that Representative Schumacher is working really hard on the long-term care imperative bill. I know Representative Franson has brought forward the bill that fully funds the waiting list in CCAP, which of course costs about $270 million. We have seen bills for ending homeless youth. We have seen bills to feed hungry people. We are seeing all sorts of provisions coming through the division right now that are going to put a lot of pressure on that budget. And I know a number of people who are coming to lobby me that are concerned about what will take our priority. And I think that this body has always felt a strong sense of commitment and bipartisan commitment to making sure that we are serving people with disabilities. And here's our chance right now to make sure that that is our top priority for this legislature, by making sure that we're moving this forward now to demonstrate that it is our priority and that it's not going to get in the way of the process that Representative Knobloch is talking about, but instead that we together, just like we did with Representative Hamilton last cycle, that we put this first and that we fully fund that 5% raise for the people who are caring for people with disabilities in their homes and in our communities. And so therefore, Representative Newton, I think you're right. We should move in urgency now. We should suspend the rules and take this up and get it on its way to the governor. Thank you very much for bringing it forward.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. So members, I urge you to support the suspension of the rules. This is a very important provision, and we heard this week in the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee, we heard from a very eloquent woman who delivers this kind of care. And we know, most members understand how important this is. We hear from these people in our own communities all the time. They are caring for many of our most vulnerable neighbors. They work extraordinarily hard, and they sacrifice a great deal to do this important work. So in the committee, I asked Representative Hamilton if this 5% was even going to meet the needs, and although he didn't have any number for me, the impression was that it even doesn't. It doesn't even meet needs. Even this 5%, even after the 6% increase that this same group of folks got in the last biennium, when the Democrats were in charge, they got a 6% increase. We also had to buy back a 1.67% cut that the GOP had passed when you were in charge. And now you have an opportunity to show how committed you are to doing this important work. I know that so many of you are carrying bills that increase funding for these groups of people in our Health and Human Services programs. I know that Representative Hamilton has many bills. Representative Franson has bills. Many of the members in HHS have these bills. It's almost like you can't tell the parties apart anymore. So many of you are carrying bills that we would be carrying if we were in the majority. But now's your chance, members. Now's your chance to show that you really do care about this, that it isn't just all talk. So as you vote for the suspension of the rules, you are voting to say, is this an important enough issue to you to move it forward, to move it to the head of the line? Or are you going to wait until your leadership sets a target in Health and Human Services and then claim that you didn't have any power? Because once those targets are set, those of you who are freshmen, once those targets are set and your chair is going to come out with a bill, and the bill is going to not include a lot of these very important things that you are telling your constituents that you support. So this is your opportunity to say to your constituents, yes, this really is a priority for me. I'm going to vote to suspend the rules and move this bill forward and vote it through today, because I really do care about these low-income workers who are doing this work day after day and really need my support. So members, please vote yes on the suspension of the rules.
The member from Washington, Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. If you truly want to have a good debate about the priorities and really look at the priorities within the Health and Human Services Finance Committee, there's not a lot of stuff there that is stuff that you wouldn't want to do. There's a lot of taking care of other people, whether it's elderly people in their homes, in nursing facilities, little kids with hockey helmets, with seizures getting taken care of in their homes, elsewhere, all across the state of Minnesota, in every single county, there's really hard-working people that are taking care of other people, sometimes volunteering, sometimes working at very low wages. We want to make sure that we are doing right by these folks, and it's true, Representative Newton is correct, that we have a great emergency in the state of Minnesota, that we're losing a lot of these folks to other industries. We need to make sure that we keep them doing what they love to do, which is to take care of other people. If you truly want to do that, let's vote to have this conversation and have a good debate about our priorities, about how we're taking care of people in the Health and Human Services Committee, and let's bring it back and do the best we can and advocate the very best you can for your constituents.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lilly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise to speak in support of the suspension of the rules for Representative Newton's motion. And as Representative Liebling said, you know, in the Aging Committee, we just had an opportunity to hear the bill that my esteemed classmate from Worthington is offering, and Representative Newton is working on as well. And it's, you know, clearly, as Representative Liebling said, you know, we did a lot of good work in the last couple of years bipartisanly, and here's your chance. You know, a lot of us served, you know, before I came here, I was on a city council. And I don't know if you ever heard what Representative Gruenhagen is. I don't see him today, but I guess he served on the school board. I don't know if you ever said that or not, but 16 years. So, you know, when you're on a school board or city council, you get a chance to, you know, so say you're having a lunch today or something, you come up with an idea, you can, a good idea, and then it can become law by the next meeting on a Tuesday. You know, we don't get that chance very often here. Here is something that we have vetted. It's had years of vetting, and clearly we've, you know, Chair Schumacher brought us down to Faribault, and we heard some great testimony there in and we know this, all over the state, there's staffing problems, and these folks are going to work in so many places. And what does that mean? A couple things. People are working short and in a situation, and there's a video that's out there right now. I challenge you all to kind of look at it. It's about Helen, and it's an elderly lady, and in a nursing home though, but it's pretty much the same kind of situation because we have the same issue there. But so what happens is, you know, they're not going to know that Helen doesn't like broccoli, for example. So you get so much turnover, 35%, I think we heard the other day, 35% turnover in some of these places, or even higher, and they're not going to know. They're not going to know their meds. They're not going to know that they don't like broccoli. I always think of that because I'm not a big fan of broccoli. So I'm hoping someone knows I don't like broccoli when I start losing it even more. But I rise to support this. I think we've all vetted it, and I think you really should support it. Just if nothing else, for Representative Gruenhagen, you know, we could kind of say it's his school board motion here.
The member from Rock, Representative Schumacher.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I really appreciate the body's feeling that just going through the Aging Committee is enough to have it go to the floor and be ready for a vote. I really appreciate having that kind of power and influence. But yesterday when we had the House File 564 come up, I was anticipating the debate would go on for maybe about half an hour. Some of our members who had later bills in the agenda were getting a little worried because we went on for about an hour and 15 minutes on this bill because there were a lot of questions about the process. that this would go through. And there were questions that Representative Liebling raised about what the real need is and what is out there. And there are a lot of questions that we weren't able to answer at that point. Some of them being what kind of buckets are available for funding sources for these groups and what all impacts there were going to be with that. We don't have fiscal staff because it is a policy committee, and because we didn't have that staff available, we didn't get those answers. And so I remember very clearly asking Representative Hamilton to keep the questions of the committee in mind when it went on to the Finance Committee so that we could get those questions answered then, and would ask members to today vote no so that we can get those questions answered before it comes to the floor, and so we can have a more robust debate on it in the future with all the information that we should have. Thank you.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I would encourage a yes vote. On the motion we just previously talked about that was tabled by Representative Knobloch, most of the people in this body essentially gave up their power to set the budget targets. You gave up your power to put the $300 million that's going to be needed to fund this bill, if you really believe in it, into the hands of Representative Knobloch and the Ways and Means Committee and Speaker Doubt. I think this is your chance, at least on this narrow issue, to take your power back. If you remember last year, 2 years ago, we were facing a $625 million budget deficit. We were in the red by $625 million. And yet, we were able to fund $267 million in new spending in long-term care as a result of that. And if you also remember, Representative Hamilton rose on this House floor and others saying that there's no better time than now to take up this bill. In fact, I'm going to quote from Representative Hamilton from his speech on the floor when he rose 2 years ago and said we should do exactly what Representative Newton is saying we should do right now. Representative Hamilton said, I quote, "We need to do this, and this is the time to do it, right here, right now." It was exactly this time in the session 2 years ago, Representatives, that Representative Hamilton said that. He went on, and think about this, members. When we'll go back home, we're accused of just carrying the party water, towing the line, not bucking leadership at any point of time. This is our option right here to do the right thing. Well, I think Representative Hamilton, I think you should listen to Representative Hamilton, all of you members who are sitting on this floor and just voted to give up your power to do anything to your party leaders. We should vote on this bill right now. Representative Franzen spoke up and took great offense when Representative Purcell suggested maybe we shouldn't do this. She said, I take great offense at the fact that you don't believe that this is an emergency. This is an emergency to the workers. This is an emergency to the caregivers. This is an emergency to those who seek care. All of you over there who believe that we need to fund long-term care more effectively, that we need to do the 5%, just as we did 2 years ago, that should take Representative Franzen's advice and vote yes on Representative Newton's motion. Representative Drazkowski, this is going to surprise some people. Representative Drazkowski, 2 years ago, on this very motion, asking that we suspend the rules to bring the 5% bill back to the floor, said, members, it's time. It's time for even Democrats to realize the priorities of Minnesota are the priorities that we set here in the legislature. This is the time, and then quoting Representative Dean, who just spoke up against this motion, he raised his hand and said, 5 means 5. Do you all remember that? Representative Drazkowski, 5 means 5. Representative Drazkowski, the most conservative member of this body, thinks you should vote for this motion today, thinks that you should support Representative Newton. Unless Representative Drazkowski and Representative Hamilton and Representative Franzen were just playing politics, and I doubt that that's what they were doing 2 years ago. But if that's what they were doing, perhaps then we shouldn't follow them. But if they were standing up for what they really believe, then they should support this motion on the floor right now. Representative Doubt at the time, Speaker Doubt now, but Minority Doubt, Leader Doubt at the time, said the people that are advocating this 5% campaign deserve better. They deserve to be treated with the respect that I think we all want to treat them with, not to play politics, and he was talking about actually bringing this up for a clean vote. They deserve a clean vote on this bill. Representative Knobloch, you noticed those words. Representative Doubt at the time didn't think this was going to be a pathway to failure, as you just said, and in fact, I think you're totally wrong on that. If we pass this bill here today, I have no doubt that it's going to become law. But he said we need a clean vote on this bill so they can see that they have broad bipartisan support. And it's the majority of the Minnesota House of Representatives that at that time wanted to play politics with this bill, which is what you exactly are doing if you don't support this bill. So members, we should stand up here. We should join what you said we ought to do 2 years ago. What I'm sure you said on the camp. Will Representative Backer yield for a question, Mr. Speaker? Representative Backer, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
He's not on the floor. He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Backer, when you were talking to your constituents recently and on the campaign trail, did you talk about the importance of investing in long-term care and the importance of making sure that our long-term care workers get the kind of wages that they deserve?
Representative Backer.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, I did indeed.
Will Representative Backer yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Representative Backer. Is the money that we invested after raising all those taxes last year, in the last 2 years, was that money that we invested, the $267 million that we invested in long-term care last year for nursing homes and other long-term care workers, was that part of the wasteful spending that you accused the DFL of pursuing in the last 2 years?
Representative Backer.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, the wasteful spending that I talked about was the Senate office building.
Representative Thiessen.
So the wasteful spending was $3 million out of a budget of $39 billion. That's the wasteful spending that you're telling me that you were talking about. If that's the case, well, there was no other wasteful spending you can think of. And you certainly don't think, I suppose, that this investment in long-term care was wasteful spending. Is that correct, Representative Backer? I'd ask him to yield again.
He will yield. Representative Backer.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, I'm an EMT. I've been an EMT for 20 years. I get up at 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, when that pager goes off. I'm 911 in our area. And because of that, yes, I believe that spending for seniors is important, but the Senate office building was wasteful spending.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thiessen.
So I assume, Representative Backer, that you are going to be supporting this Representative Newton motion because you think that the seniors are...
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Knobloch, for what
I
purpose do you
rise
rise?
to a point of order underneath Section 114 of Mason's Point 5. A question as to what course a member proposes to follow is not in order.
Mr. Speaker, I didn't ask a question. I was just stated my assumption. Sure it is.
Mr. Speaker, I'm prepared to offer advice.
State your advice.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Thiessen had asked the representative to yield. He was clearly asking him if he was, in fact, going to support this motion, given Representative Thiessen's supposition about some of the other positions that he had. And members, I've heard this a lot since I've gotten back. And members, it's just not in order to be questioning people about what sort of action they're going to take on a motion or how they're going to vote.
I'll withdraw the question, Mr. Speaker, to the extent
I will defer ruling on the point of order and remind members to keep the discussions to the issue at hand and not question members on how they might vote. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one of the reasons, and I shouldn't, if I did ask that question, I apologize, I shouldn't. Just one of the reasons that popped into my mind is that Representative Backer is actually on this $300 million bill as a co-author. So I was just making assumptions. I'm sorry. Representative Backer, will he yield for one more question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Representative Backer. To your point about this being appropriate spending, some other things being inappropriate or wasteful spending, I was just wondering if he had offered any legislation this year to actually cut a single dollar of spending. If Representative Backer will yield to that question.
Representative Backer.
Speaker and Representative, not that I'm aware of.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Will Representative Daniels yield for a question? Daniels.
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Daniels, I guess one of the questions I guess I would ask, again, we've given up our power as a body to actually address this through the budget resolution process with the last vote. So this is your chance to move forward on this. I guess the question is, when you were out on the campaign trail and in your subsequent conversations with your constituents, I think there was a hearing down in your area on long-term care, if I'm not mistaken, that the committee went on the road down to Faribault. Is this kind of is the $237 million that we put into long-term care in the last biennium? Was that part of the wasteful spending that you were talking about when you talked about wasteful spending?
Representative Daniels. Representative Knobloch, for what purpose do you rise?
I rise to another point of order under the section 114.4. Questions addressed to members may relate only to a question before the body. Members, we're talking about the suspension of the rules.
Mr.
Thank you, Representative Knobloch. I will defer ruling on this one as well and remind, you are accurate, we'll remind members to keep the discussion before the motion before the body right now, which is a motion to suspend the rules. And Representative Thiessen, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I understand it, it's a motion to suspend the rules to actually take up and pass a bill related to adding 5% for long-term care, which is exactly what I was asking Representative Daniels about. So, Representative Daniels, to support the $237 million, remember, we were facing a $625 million budget deficit 2 years ago, unlike the $2 billion budget deficit that you are now, close to $2 billion, that you are now working with. And so I guess one of my questions is, so I think you just answered that you do not think that this was part of the wasteful spending. So I guess the question is, do you support the tax increases that actually paid for that $237 million, tax increases that we used to, first of all, balance the deficit, $625 million, and to pay back our schools $800 million?
Representative Fabian, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, what business is before the chamber?
Representative Fabian, we are on a motion to suspend the rules. It's a Newton motion.
I'm not sure what everybody's so afraid of, Mr. Speaker. I'm just asking some questions. So
Representative Thiessen.
Representative Daniels, again, did you support the taxes that were increased in the last 2 years in order to actually provide these wage increases that we provided over the last 2 years, after balancing the budget deficit, after paying back the schools, and making a number of investments, including all-day kindergarten? But did you support those tax increases?
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Davids, for what purpose do you rise?
The point of order.
State your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Section 121.2, a member who resorts to persistent irrelevance or to persistent repetition after the attention of the House has been called to the matter may be directed to discontinue this speech by the presiding officer.
Mr. Speaker, advice, if you want it.
Members, again, I'm going to defer ruling on this, but Representative Thiessen, I will advise you, you are quite afar from the actual motion that's before the body, which is a motion to suspend the rules. Your last line of questioning did not have anything to do with this motion, nor the bill that it's trying to move to suspend the rules. So please keep your comments to the motion that's before the body, which is the suspension of rules. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Daniels yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Do you think it's urgent, Representative Daniels, that we move forward on making sure that the workers that live in your district and in districts all across the state that provide long-term care, that they should get the kind of wage increases and assistance that's encapsulated in the bill that we want to bring up before the
Representative Daniels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Thiessen, for the question. I believe long-term care is imperative that we fix the problem. I was not here 2 years ago. I was not here last year, so I have a lot of comment on that. But we have a bill that's coming forth, the System 316, that's being sponsored by Chair Schumacher, and I believe that's a very critical part of the fix for senior care. I don't think this one is the total fix, so I would not support it at this time.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Rarick yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Rarick, have you heard from your constituents, either on the campaign trail or since, as you've been elected a representative, about the urgency of making sure that we provide enough resources to our long-term care workers so that they can perform the work that we need them really to do, and heard that they have been underpaid so far, and we need more resources to be going to those folks?
Representative Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, yes, I have been hearing from constituents that funding for nursing homes and long-term care is important.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thiessen.
Will Representative Rarick yield to another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and have you, I mean, in light of what you've heard from that, was the investment in long-term care that we're talking about here, but that we also passed, the $237 million that we passed in the last legislative session, was that part of the wasteful spending that you campaigned on in the last campaign?
Representative Rarick.
Mr. Speaker, Representative, that was not part of what I campaigned on. It claimed to be wasteful spending.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, it's actually very interesting as we're going through. At least we found one portion of the spending that we did in the 2013-14 session, $237 million worth of it. And I'm assuming everybody thought we had to balance the budget and get the schools paid back, but that actually wasn't wasteful spending. And so, in some sense, people were encouraged to actually increase the state budget to take care of this priority. That's what I've heard from Representative Rarick, from Representative Daniels, from Representative Backer, that there's at least part of this that was okay from the last session. And I'm also assuming there's not a lot of people, because I haven't seen any bills put in to do this, that wanted to roll back the all-day kindergarten, that wanted to roll back the investment we had made in broadband and a whole other serious things. So I'm getting really, really confused about what I was hearing on the campaign trail and now what I'm hearing here and seeing here with regard to Representative Hamilton's bill to spend $300 million that probably won't even solve the problem, with Representative Schumacher's bill to spend another $200 million to fix the nursing home side of things. That's $500 million that two very distinguished members of this body think is needed on the Republican side of this body, that they think is needed to actually solve the problem in long-term care. It just doesn't match up to what some of the things that I've heard in the past. This, members, is your chance. Your chance, Representative Rarick. Your chance, Representative Backer. Your chance, Representative Daniels, and others, to actually put your money where your mouth is. To do what Speaker Doudt says we always need to do, to make our actions match our words. This is your chance to vote, to do away with what Representative Knobloch thinks is the right thing to do, because he's going to want to pinch pennies. We know that. To do all of the things that you have told your constituents you want to do. And Representative Rarick, I know from your district, because I've been up there and visited with the long-term care folks up in your district, that those nursing homes in particular are suffering, and those long-term care workers in your district are really struggling because of the reimbursement rates they get versus a lot of areas close by to them, and that they really are having a very difficult time. And I don't know if you sat down with those long-term care providers in your district and heard the same thing. I'm sure you have. But we've had lots of conversations about that. Will Representative Heinzman yield for a question?
He's not on the floor at the current time.
Will Representative Lueck yield for a question?
Could you repeat that?
Lueck.
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Lueck, I know that you talked about a lot about long-term care in the campaign trail, and I know you've talked a lot about it. I'm sure that you've talked a lot about it since. So I guess my first question is similar to the ones that I talked to the other ones. Are you hearing from your constituents now that the need to invest in long-term care to make sure that our long-term care...
Representative Fabian, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Speaker, what business is before the chamber?
Thank you, Representative Fabian.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Fabian, to answer
Point
your
question. Mr. Speaker.
One moment. Representative Fabian, to answer your question, we are in a suspension of the rules. It's a Newton motion to suspend the rules to bring up House File 564. Representative Winkler.
Mr. Speaker, point of order. This is,
State your point
I don't
of
know
order.
how many times it is. It's at least 6 times that members of the majority caucus who have the votes to pass bills or to defeat motions as they see fit
State your point of order, Representative Winkler.
on the floor under Mason's 1.21 through their own persistent irrelevance and raising persistently irrelevant parliamentary inquiries and points of order in order to obstruct the course of debate. Mr. Speaker, if the majority doesn't like what the minority has to say, they just have to sit and listen until we're ready to vote, and then they win. That's the majority rule around here, but you don't have to constantly interrupt debate. You don't have to speak over the minority at the same time that you vote us down. You can choose one or the other. We'd be happy to take the majority votes if you want to do all the talking, but otherwise you should
Mr. Speaker?
State your point of order, Representative Winkler.
Point of order.
Mr. Speaker,
State your point of order, Representative Winkler.
Mr. Speaker, under Mason's Rule 1.21, Representative Fabian rose another time to ask about the business before the House, which was a form of persistent irrelevance and should be gavelled down as out of order.
I find your point of order not well taken. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So Representative Lueck, and he will yield for a question, I believe.
He will yield, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. So in order to pay for this investment in long-term care, which I think that we should do right now, which is a priority and an urgency for you, I know, have you proposed any bills to cut other spending in order to pay for this $300 million investment that's very, very much needed for long-term care? Have you introduced any bills to cut spending this year?
Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Thiessen. I'm looking for a question that's relative to the matter before us.
And I'm looking for an answer that's relevant to the
Thiessen.
matter before us, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, the answer to that question is no. And so I guess I'd ask Representative Lueck to yield to another question.
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
In order to pursue this urgent bill, this $300 million 5% campaign that everybody was so urgent to take up on I'm saying urgent too much, but so urgent to take up on an urgency last year or 2 years ago on that side of the aisle, Representative Lueck, have you proposed any tax increases? If you haven't proposed any spending cuts, have you proposed any tax increases to actually pay for this new spending?
Representative
Thank you, Mr.
Lueck.
Speaker and Representative Thiessen. I'm still looking for a question relative to the matter before us, sir. Thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Well, Representative Lueck, I think this is very relevant to the matter before us. I'm surprised that you would think paying for a proposal is not relevant. Maybe, though, he's pursuing the old Republican strategy of money is magic and it just falls out of the sky, which I'm afraid we're going to see a lot of in the next couple of weeks as these budget targets come out. But I take it as a no also so you haven't proposed to cut any spending, haven't proposed any tax increases. Will Representative Lueck yield to one more question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Representative Lueck. I know on the campaign trail and since you've talked a lot about how bad the tax increases that were passed by the DFL last year were, have you proposed any legislation to roll back any of the taxes that were passed last year?
Representative Lueck.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Thiessen. Again, I'm patiently waiting for a question that is relative to the matter before the House. Thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I know the answer to that as well. The answer is no, because other than Representative Chair Davids, who has proposed a small rollback of the cigarette tax in a very small way. No bills have been introduced this year to roll back any of the taxes that were passed last year, which again is causing me incredible confusion because of all the urgency that I heard over the last year about how bad every single one of those tax increases were. And yet you get here and you don't do what your speaker says, which is to make your actions match your words. So I'm looking forward, Representative Davids, as your tax bill proceeds, that we'll see the rollback of the fourth tier, and we'll see the rollback, the reopening of some of the corporate tax loopholes that we paid in the last year. And it's relevant to this discussion, members, because what we've been seeing and what we want to do, what Representative Newton wants to do here, is actually do what everybody in this body, I think, has told their constituents, which is we want to make more investments in long-term care. We want to make $300 million investments, which is just a 5% and a 5% increase, which even Representative Hamilton in committee acknowledged wasn't enough to actually solve the problem. Everybody on this floor wants to make sure that we make that investment. And 2 years ago, the folks on this floor were outraged when they thought that we may not do that. Now, in fact, we did do that. We did deliver on that. But it doesn't come for free. Will Representative Miller yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you. Representative Miller, have you talked to your constituents about the importance of investing in long-term care and the wages of those workers in your district?
Representative Miller.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Thiessen, I thank you for this moment. Last November, when I was elected, when I beat one of your best friends by over 10.5 points, you went and door knocked with him, and I still beat him by 10.5 points. You lost your speakership because there was about 20 of us that were elected. At that time, I was not elected as King of Minnesota. I was elected as a representative of my district, and I gladly represent that district. The problem that I have is that the mess that you made over the last 2 years as representative, I can't fix. As King of Minnesota, as it sounds like you want to be, it can be fixed. I would be more than happy to be able to roll back some of the waste that I've had to listen to committee after committee after committee. But there's a procedure that we're talking about in here. We have a rule of order that you seem to want to just run around outside of. Instead, I believe that we should follow the process of what we do here. I will be gladly to help sit side by side with you in your office and find cuts that we can have to get the spending in Minnesota in order. Until then, if you expect me to fix it all by myself, that's just not going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Mr. Speaker, will Representative Miller yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Representative Miller. And I guess my question is, as representative of your district, are you hearing from your constituents how important it is that we invest in the long-term care that's captured in House File 564?
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Thiessen, thank you for that question. The people in my district are begging us to run an honest, fair, straightforward, and government with integrity. Thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, maybe he hasn't heard from his constituents how important long-term care is. Will Representative Miller yield for another question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Representative Miller. I know you're not the king of Minnesota. I don't think anybody here wants to be here, wants to be that. Maybe he doesn't want to be here at this point either. But you talked about working together to propose cuts to pay for some of the spending like is in this $300 million bill. Representative Miller, have you proposed a single bill that actually cuts spending in Minnesota this time? Because you do have power to do that.
Representative Miller.
I am working with a couple representatives on just that. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I apologize. Mr. Speaker, Representative Thiessen, I am working with some representatives on those cuts. Thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I look forward to seeing that. You know, we are approaching in deadline week. So, members, I think that it's very important that we take Representative Newton up on his motion here. This is your chance before those budget targets come out, and I am fairly confident that the budget targets that come out next week, I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to make a guess that the budget targets that come out next week are not going to have sufficient money to pay for Representative Schumacher's $200 million and Representative Hamilton's $300 million that both of those distinguished members, and I think a lot of people in this body, believe is the amount of money. In fact, Representative Hamilton doesn't even think it's enough money, but to help to solve the problem of long-term care, something that's a priority for everybody in this body. And this is the opportunity, representatives, to cast a vote, to take this up, to send this bill over to the Senate, and actually get moving forward on solving some of the problems we have here in the state of Minnesota. I think that this is absolutely the right thing to do. As Representative Hamilton said last year, we need to do this, and we need to do it now. It's our option right here to do the right thing. I think that we ought to take him up on his words. We're not facing a $625 million deficit as we did 2 years ago. Members, we have a nearly $2 billion surplus because our economy is good, because the state government, because spending has gone down, because state government has been managed in the right way over the last 2 years. We need to take an opportunity right now to put our money where our mouth is. This is your opportunity, members, to do that. I encourage a yes vote on Representative Newton's motion, and I look forward, after that yes vote is taken, to moving forward and voting this bill forward.
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Morgan yield? I'm sorry, would Representative Falk yield? I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Minority Leader Thiessen, if your policies were so great, we'd probably still be calling you Mr. Speaker. You know, you sit here and you call us out on this. You know what? I think the difference last year when we stood up and asked for this to move forward was because the budget targets actually came out. And there was not enough money that was set aside into the Health and Human Services Finance Committee to carry the full 5%. And that's where the outrage came. And quite frankly, I'm pretty honored that I'm being quoted here on the House floor, because I didn't think anybody had ever listened to me, to be honest with you. Representative Newton, thank you so much. And I look forward to continue working with you on this. And I also want to say, while I have the floor, Representative Backer, great job. You sound like a veteran. Representative Daniels, way to go, my friend. Representative Rarick, you know, Lewick, this is great. You guys handled it fantastic. Representative Miller, I couldn't be prouder of my fellow colleagues here. And so we're looking at doing this, and you know what? You're absolutely right. I don't know if this is enough money. We had a lot of questions when it came to it. This is an area that I'm extremely passionate about. There's no question about it. Extremely passionate about. And so Chair Schumacher talked about what some of the things that we still need to discuss as we move this forward. And so I asked that I think it was Chair Knobloch that his motion is before us. I ask that we support Chair Knobloch's motion. Thank you.
The member from Anoka, Representative Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And will Representative Hamilton yield?
He will yield. Representative Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Hamilton, as you know, this bill for the biennium is about $300 million, and for the next biennium it's close to $500 million. We both feel that this bill should go forward. We both feel that we need to fund this. However, when we hear talk about, you know, rolling back all of the surplus, giving back the entire $1.9 billion, or giving back half of it, if we don't act now, and I'm asking you to give me your opinion on this, if we don't act now and vote on this now, do you think that there will be money there to pay for this after the figures come out? Thank you.
Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question, Representative Newton. And you know, I've been a little frustrated with some of the comments, some of the rhetoric that's coming forth and saying, well, you guys, and meaning us, as far as saying that we've taken one position or the other. You know what? That's not fair. It's not fair to me, and it's not fair to others on the floor to put us all in a single category. It's public information. I was asked the same question. I think it was reported in the Star Tribune, and I simply said a couple things, same thing that I said back home. I said, I'm going to take the approach this way, is one, we're going to listen to all the ideas so that we fully understand what is the need, right? Fully understand what is the need. let's wait at this time. I said, let's wait and make sure that we understand how much dollars that we actually have. Take a look at that as well and work things through the process, because this is the great way to do things, right? And I said, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for probably a more balanced approach. And I maybe differ from some of my colleagues. I said, you take a look at what the needs are, and you and I are very passionate about this, my friend. And you know what? It's an honor to work with you on this. There's no question about it. We're very passionate about it. And I understand that there's other needs, and people's passions are different all around here, and I respect that as well. I said, so let's take a look at investing in some of these areas that have been underserved in the past, and there's enough blame to go around on all. Let's take a look at having some dollars set aside for more of a rainy day fund, if you will, and so we can plan for these. I mean, we've had high deficits and up and down, or deficits and surpluses, and let's try to figure out a way that we can plan for this a little bit better. And then there may be some tax relief that could come forward as well. We've heard from business owners, we've heard from farmers, we heard from others that have had some hardship with the taxes that are before us. So I've said publicly, I think we should have a balanced approach. And so I may differ with a few of the others or the commercials that you'll see on TV, but that's what I've been saying. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Sherwood, Representative Knobloch.
Well, Mr. Speaker, members of the House, I'm not going to ask anyone to yield and ask them how they're going to vote on any issues, because, as I mentioned before, I really think that that is something that is not in order under the rules of the House. And yet, as I think about things that have changed since I was here 8 years ago, that is something that has changed. I hear a lot more about that than I used to hear. And I'm not going to accuse anyone of playing politics either, because questioning members' motives is also against the rules of the House. And yet I do hear a lot more of that, it seems like, than I did before. But I am going to speak to the motion before us, the suspension of the rules, and just give a little bit of history for people. I haven't been here for the last 8 years, but Representative Thiessen, you're right. When I was Ways and Means Chair from 2003 to 2006, we did bring the budget resolution to the floor for a full vote of the House. However, after the Republicans lost the majority in 2006 and the Democrats took over, the rules were changed so that now the Ways and Means Committee alone set the budget resolution. That group of people in the Ways and Means Committee you were talking about, Representative Thiessen, only they now set the budget resolution. And I suspect that all the members of the DFL that were here at that time voted for that. I guess I don't know how you voted, Representative Thiessen. I don't have the journal in front of me. But again, in 2009, we had another vote on the permanent rules of the House, and again, we left that provision in, and I presume the DFL that was in charge at that time voted to keep the budget resolution as something that is decided by the Ways and Means Committee. In 2011, the Republicans took over, and they kept that rule in place. They kept the rule that the Democrats had had the last 4 years and said, yes, we're going to keep that decision in the Ways and Means Committee. And the following election, when the Democrats took over again, that rule was again kept. I don't know what the vote was. I suspect that Representative Thiessen voted for it again. But we had 4 successive votes for the permanent rules of the House to have the budget resolution decided by the Ways and Means Committee instead of the full House, as it was decided back in 2003 to 2006. And finally, members, we had a debate this year in 2015.
Representative Thiessen, for what purpose do you rise?
What order of business are we on? I thought Representative Knobloch already tabled that motion.
Thank you, Representative Thiessen. We are on a motion to suspend the rules to take up House File 564.
And so, members,
Representative Knobloch.
I don't think we should suspend the rules, because this year, in 2015, we also had another vote on the permanent rules of the House, and again we voted to keep the budget resolution as a matter for the Ways and Means Committee, and there was no amendment offered of any kind by the DFL minority to change that. So, members, for the last 9 years we've had it this way. I would guess the vast majority of members of both the House Republicans and the House Democrats have voted for this. Members, we've had this vote many times. I think that given that, we should not suspend the rules to change it today.
The member from Rice, Representative Bly.
Thank you, Speaker. President Hamilton, I'm going to mention your name. I just want to make sure you knew that. I have tremendous respect for you. I think we share passions that oftentimes follow the same issues. You may remember a number of years ago something that we partnered on in a sense. The engine of the legislature moves on, and people have talked about the process, and sometimes the process doesn't get us where some of us passionate people want to be. And there was an issue where when we were cutting budgets having to do with the disabled, and I, went against my leadership and wanted to tack on an amendment that would protect the workers who worked with the disabled. Now, courage is one thing, but you still have to work with your leadership, and I had to say, I'll withdraw my amendment because I want to make the point. I want to make it clear that this is an important issue, that we shouldn't be cutting these workers. And Representative Hamilton stood up, as any member can do, and took my amendment and brought it forward. And was able to save some money for those workers. I share your not only your passion, but your desire that sometimes even when we don't think about it or know about it, we work together and get something done. That's not partisan. This is clearly not a partisan issue. I think there's strong support on both sides of the aisle for this. This may be a time, because as the engine of the legislature goes forward and the process goes forward, what we're hearing when we say we got to have this go through the process is that there isn't going to be the funding there. There isn't going to be enough for all the things we want to do. And this may get cut back. And that's why I think this is a timely moment for us to come together, suspend the rules, and pass this very important bill. I visit my mother at the nursing home. She's on a memory unit, and I talk to those workers on almost every other day basis. And I know that they need more. I know that they need more. Some of them drive old cars if they have a car. Their needs we can't really comprehend, and yet we ask them to take care of our loved ones. So I implore you, suspend the rules, and let's take up this matter. Thank you.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I am grateful that you have mentioned and invoked the names of some of those members who are not here right now. Maybe it was close to the line in terms of rules, but it's good to hear their names. And it made me think about the time, all the time that I spent in all sorts of places this last summer and fall, and looking at the literature and listening to the debate that was happening across the state of Minnesota, and remembering that while there was rhetoric about the size of the budget and too many taxes, a lot of the information that was being mailed to Minnesotans coming from some of the new members in the Republican caucus didn't really say a lot about anything. It really didn't take a whole lot of a stand. And Minnesotans on November the 4th gave you the edge, right? A few more seats, and we lost a few seats, and that's the way that goes. And I think that the part of this debate that I find most frustrating, and again, Representative Newton, I'm so glad you brought this forward, because it does say a lot about who we are right now, what we do. The thing that I find frustrating about this debate that we're having right now is I bet most of the people in this chamber would support, a 5% and a 5% increase for people with disabilities and those caring for them. And we are days now away from the release of budget targets. And really that's where we're going to start to see what your leadership really means. And this debate today has gotten a little heated, and I'm feeling that. And that's because I ran for office because what we do here is important. It's important for the people of Minnesota. And the decisions that we're going to make on the budget are important. And if we get a little heated, it's because it's damned important. And here we are talking about a very important issue to Minnesotans and asking some questions about where you stand. And you're not really willing yet to answer where you stand. I can't tell if you want to cut spending, or I can't tell if you want to cut taxes. I know that there have been lots and lots of commitments made by members in the majority in terms of spending. And I keep putting that puzzle together, trying to figure out how it is that you're going to meet those demands. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that that overcommitment that you've made is the reason why you are having such a hard time answering the questions that are coming from us right now. Because I don't think you can fill all those commitments. You didn't say a whole lot about what you stood for during the campaign. But the budget and the targets that you set next week are going to say a lot about your leadership. It's going to say a lot about your priorities. It's going to say a lot about for what you stand. And Minnesotans will know that. So honestly, I'm not quite sure why you can't answer those questions now, unless you really don't know the answers yet. And I got to say, if you don't know the answers yet, you better get to work, because you just got a few more days before you show us the targets that you intend and the budget you intend to inflict upon Minnesotans. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Washington, Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Mahoney yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Mahoney, you've been a previous chair. You've been in the House of Representatives a bit longer than a few of us. You had a budget as a chair of the committee that you've had before, is that correct?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Schoen, yes, I've been a budget chair.
Representative Schoen.
Would Representative Mahoney continue to yield?
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Mahoney. In your committee or committees that you've chaired in the past, if there was consensus amongst the body to spend approximately $300 million on an issue that was very near and dear to everyone and something that you worked through, would there be the ability to come back and add more to that particular issue if we needed to do that even after we passed the initial $300 million?
Representative Mahoney.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Schoen, as a fiscal chair, I or any fiscal chair does not have the ability to hand out $300 million or $330 million and then just add more to it. It would really be the preview of the Speaker and the Ways and Means Chair to figure out, okay, you spent your first $300 million, here's your other $9 billion. So, yes, essentially what you're asking is, can a fiscal chair spend money, then go back to the finance people in his caucus or her caucus and say, I want to spend more. And yes, that can be done so long as the tax chair can raise the revenue.
Representative Schoen.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Carlson yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Schoen.
Representative Carlson, you've been in the legislature longer than I've been alive. So you've seen a few things come and go and a few different policies and movements. Is there any precedent to adding more to a program, or the legislature has in the past passed a budget or a bill that spends money and then we come back and go, you know what? It wasn't enough.
Representative Carlson.
Mr. Speaker, members, first of all, I've been accused of going back to statehood, but not quite that far. But at any rate, it can happen in a variety of ways, but the bottom line answer to your question is yes, you can add more. It typically is done in a conference committee. It's done the second year of the biennium. Some people remember the supplemental appropriations bill for personal care attendants. If you'll recall, the first year of the biennium it was passed at 1%, and then the second year we added to it, so we brought it up to 5%, if I recall correctly. So basically the answer to the question is yes. Next Tuesday would set the stage. If this bill were to pass today, then under the House budget resolution you could add more into the Health and Human Services bill if you chose, and you could pass additional funding if you chose. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Carlson. Well, I just want to rise in support of Representative Newton's motion today. This bill seems to have great consensus amongst the body, and this is something that we can coalesce around in a great way and show Minnesotans. Here's the baseline. We know that we're losing these workers by 30+% turnover, and it's almost like a man-made disaster. When we have a disaster in Minnesota, we come in and we act quickly, and we send relief out to the communities. And I think what Representative Newton is saying here today is let's get the relief out to our communities, especially in greater Minnesota, like the Clare City Nursing Home and some of those folks out there that are begging for help. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Folks, we got a lot of good work to do, and we got to have it done by midnight tomorrow for the first policy deadline. I appreciate the minority's points being made and carrying on and let us know how important this issue is, because it is an important issue. But we got a number of committees that have to meet tonight yet and probably all day tomorrow. And Mr. Speaker, I want to remind them that the deadline is midnight tomorrow night. And there's some policy bills that if we don't get back and do our work from both sides of the aisle may not make the deadline. So to honor the process, members, let's move on. Let's get back to work and go do the work that we're sent here to do. Mr. Speaker and members, thank you.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, members, again, I would urge us to vote yes on this motion and start moving forward on something I really am hearing from everybody that stood up on the floor today is an urgency for the state of Minnesota. Representative Hamilton said he didn't rise until after he saw a cut target, again, in the context of the $625 million budget deficit. We now have a $1.9 billion surplus. And I guess what Representative Hamilton is suggesting is that the Republicans would never then, in that context, they couldn't think of. If you were so offended by that cut target that wouldn't manage to be able to put money into long-term care last time, I'm sure you're going to be terribly outraged if there's any sort of a cut target to Health and Human Services in the context of a $1.9 billion surplus. The other thing, a couple of people did raise the election, I did too, but raised the election and the outcome of the election last year. And I guess the point, members, that I would make is that in that election, what you ran on is we wasted all kinds of money, which today you said actually you really didn't waste the money, and you raised all kinds of taxes, which we've learned here today no one has actually meant to roll back. So the people that voted for you, Representative Miller, in the last election, voted for someone who's actually not sitting in the House of Representatives today, because you told us you haven't put together a single bill that's going to cut any of that supposed wasted spending, Representative Miller. Representative Miller said that he has, I haven't seen him propose any rollbacks of the taxes. So the person that the people in your district that you say you want to represent don't have that person sitting in the chamber today. It's a different person altogether. And that's true. It's shockingly and surprisingly and somewhat happily surprisingly true from our perspective that essentially what we see on the other side of the aisle with the $2.5+ billion in spending, the $300 million that Representative Hamilton has in this one, Representative Schumacher's $200 million, Representative Franzen's nearly $500 million in new spending this legislative session, they essentially elected a body of Democrats. And if those are the budget targets that we're going to see coming out next week, we'll be looking forward to seeing those. But I'm going to join you, Representative Hamilton, and I will be incredibly shocked if we see cut targets in any of the budget areas, but particularly in this area of long-term care. And it is interesting, Representative Hamilton, that you did rise, and I know that you're a very good and fair-minded man, and you hate the thought that anybody would question your integrity. And you did rise and say that you didn't think that anybody stood up and blamed the Democrats last year. I distinctly remember you doing that, Representative Hamilton, in the last year. So let's move forward on this bill. Let's actually either act like the people that ran for office last year, or we can pass this bill and do what we're now hearing your constituents actually want you to do. But let's vote green on this motion. Let's take Representative Newton up on what I think is the absolutely right thing to do. Let's stand up for your constituents. Let's not kowtow to leadership. Let's not bow down to leadership and the targets that they're going to set, which, I will be surprised, Representative Hamilton, if, in fact, the target, you said you were outraged by the fact that that target that we put in place last year wouldn't handle long-term care spending, the kind that you wanted, the level that you wanted. I hope that the target that Representative Dean is getting in the budget targets that Representative Knobloch will put out next week is going to allow you to do that. But if it's not, I also expect that Representative Hamilton is going to join us in the outrage. And when we bring this motion back up again after those budget targets come out, that Representative Hamilton and many, many others of you on this floor are going to vote. If you don't vote for it today, we'll vote in favor of it next time.
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I had a note down here. I just wanted to respond to Representative Bly's comments and simply say thank you. He was talking about that amendment that he had offered up, and unfortunately, he had a beautiful speech, by the way. He did. He had a beautiful speech on why we should support it. And then he asked to withdraw it, and then I was furious, so I crossed off Representative Bly's name and wrote my name across the front, top, and I sent it back up there. And when it came up to a vote, members, when it came up to a vote, Speaker Kelleher was up there, and she held open the board. And it was interesting, and the member that, I think it was Representative Broad at the time, she leans over and she says, I think it's going to pass. And all of a sudden, all the red votes started turning green, all but two. There's only two people that voted against it. One was Representative Huntley. He was the chair of Health and Human Services Finance. And guess what? The second one was Representative Thiessen, the chair in Health and Human Services Policies. Same person criticizing me for a few things here today. That's interesting. So anyway, Representative Bly, you know what? There was a great move on your part as far as bringing that amendment forward. I thank you. I've got a lot of respect for you as well. Representative Newton, tremendous amount of respect for you too. And I do look forward to working on this with everybody. And like I tell folks back home, we all have different passions. There's no question about it. And there's two areas that I focused on. One is agriculture, obviously, and the other one is health and human services. I said when you walk in someone else's shoes, you look at life a little bit differently, right? But with that said, I know every member up here may have a different passion than I do. And so, again, that's one of the reasons why we respect the process and bring everything through. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if Representative Dean will yield to a question.
He will yield. Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dean, I'm wondering, we know that as the chair of the HHS Finance Committee, you've got a very tough task ahead of you putting together an omnibus bill. I'm sure, even though we don't know yet what your target is going to be, I assume that you're working with leadership to try to decide what that target is going to be. And I know that's not an easy task, but just assuming that you don't get a target that's going to accommodate all of these important bills that your members are carrying, all of these bills that spend many millions of dollars in health and human services and great bills that all spend money that's very much needed, I'm wondering if you get too small of a target to accommodate that, and if members don't vote today to suspend the rules and pass this bill, I'm wondering what's going to be their opportunity to try to get this bill passed. If they don't agree with the target that you're given by your leadership, and say they decide that their own constituents are demanding that we raise these wages by 5%, and this is just, as you know, it's just one of many, many bills that are going to cost a lot of money to provide services that Minnesotans very much need. But if they miss their opportunity today and vote no on the suspension of the rules and don't want to take up this important bill, what is going to be their opportunity to do that? How are they going to be able to tell their constituents that they're really making a sincere effort to get this bill passed into law, even if your leadership is not in favor of it?
The member from Washington, Representative Dean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Liebling, in July of 2013, less than 2 years ago, Minnesota had a $34.34 billion budget. Currently, Governor Dayton is proposing a $42 billion budget. That is a 25% increase in spending, and we haven't even seen the last of the spending that has come out on that side. That is quite an increase, and that, Representative Liebling, was not delivered by the good graces and the benefactors sitting in chairs in this building. That was delivered by hardworking taxpayers of the state of Minnesota that expect and deserve us to really deliberate and to fund our priorities within the means that they give us. I believe that we have the budget that they have worked to, they have been overtaxed, and they've given us enough money to fund our priorities within that budget, as well as provide tax relief. And I think that's our job. That's the job of the committees, and that's the job we need to do, and we are not doing that because we are here.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Liebling.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Dean, you didn't answer the question. And the question was, how are your members, if they vote no on the suspension of the rules today, and they don't vote to take up this bill, when you get your target, and based on what you just said, I doubt very much, members, that his target is going to have room for this bill. Let's just be realistic about that right now, because we have this very important bill that spends many millions of dollars. I've got the fiscal note here. It spends $296 million and then some in the next biennium. And then in the out biennium, it costs $471 and some million. So that is a lot of money, granted, but these needs are very real. And so if you vote no today on the suspension of the rules, my question to Representative Dean is, when will you have an opportunity to say to your constituents, no matter what my leadership is saying, I really support this bill. I really want to pass this bill. How are you going to be able to do that? Well, Representative Dean is not going to tell you how, and I think the answer is going to be you won't have an opportunity. So if you're sincere in your support of these bills, if Representative Hamilton, and I believe he is totally sincere, I know he has a lot of passion for this, but members, we can all have passion for a lot of things. And the real question is, what are we willing to do for it? So you all, every GOP member, can carry bills that spend millions and millions of dollars. But the real question is, when push comes to shove, what are you willing to do to accomplish the goals that you're promising your constituents you are going to accomplish? That is the real question. And when I asked Representative Hamilton in the Aging and Long-Term Care Committee just Wednesday morning, he was presenting this bill, and I asked him very sincerely, does this really meet the needs? As expensive as this bill is this going to get us to where we really ought to be? And he got kind of testy and went into some speeches, one of which was kind of blaming me for raising taxes in the last couple years. Well, I put it to you, members, how the heck would we have been able to raise the funding as we did, and how in the heck would we be in a position to have a almost $2 billion surplus and even think about spending this kind of money if Democrats weren't willing to raise the money necessary? So you can talk all you want, you can carry all these bills, and they don't mean a darn thing, because at the end of the day, you will be saying to your constituents, sure, I'm for you, but I'm willing to do nothing to make it happen. And I hope Minnesotans are paying attention to this, because everybody wants everything. but you got to be willing to do what it takes to make that happen. And if you're going to vote no today on the suspension of the rules, you are saying to your constituents, I'm just telling you, I'm just all hot air. It's all hot air because at the end of the day, I'm not willing to even put forward a vote because my leadership doesn't want me to. And I submit to you that your constituents did not send you to St. Paul to just follow blindly what your leadership wants you to do. And this is something that freshmen will learn over time. The debates we can have on the House floor here are very partisan, but at the end of the day, your constituents want you to think for yourself, think about them, and think about what's in their best interests. And if they're telling you that home and community-based workers are underpaid and that the services can't be delivered and that there aren't people out there willing to do this very important and very difficult work because they're underpaid and that the state doesn't pay them enough, and if you believe that and you've said to your constituents, I agree with you, I'm going to go to St. Paul to work on this, then you better be voting today with the Democrats on this issue and put up a vote to suspend the rules and take up this bill and pass it today, because this may be your very only chance to do that. So if you're concerned about these issues, members, a lot of you in Health and Human Services took a vote the other day to cut our Minnesota Care program. Already we're starting to cut at a time when we have a $2 billion surplus. And you, GOP members, you don't have to raise taxes. We did that for you. You just get to complain about it now and spend the money. But at least today, step forward and say that you're willing to spend the money. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of hot air, and I hope your constituents are listening, because you can be as passionate about it as you want, but if you're not willing to put forward a vote and you're not willing to spend the money, it means nothing.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Hamilton yield to a question?
He will yield. Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hamilton, if this motion that you brought 2 years ago was a good idea when we had a $625 million deficit, why is it not a good idea to do this when we have a $1.9 billion surplus?
The member from Cottonwood, Representative Hamilton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know what? I'm absolutely honored here today. I've been up here 11 years, and my name has never been spoken so many times in all of 11 years. So I don't know, it must be my birthday or something. Actually, that's next week. And you know what? Last year, like I said, when the budgets came out, we were doing the 5% campaign. I had signed on to that. I know Representative Newton was leading the charge, and I believe it was Senator Kent Eakin over in the Senate, I believe, was leading the charge over there. And I was upset when the budget did come out because it didn't cover the 5%, straight up. Again, I was passionate in that area, and so that's why I brought it forward. Today, we don't even have our budget targets right now. And so if memory serves me correctly, we did have them then. So.
Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Hamilton. Well, I remember when you brought this motion 2 years ago, and I remember voting no because I had no idea where we were going to get the money to close the deficit, pay back the schools that you borrowed money from, and then make this priority. But I was very tempted to vote with you because you spoke so eloquently about the work that these people do. And it's work that I could not do, no matter what kind of schooling I undertook. This is the hardest work that there is that Minnesotans do. It's the most important care that's delivered. And we have a $1.9 billion surplus. So if it's important and we have the money, we should fund it. Members, I hope you'll vote for a suspension of the rules, and I hope you'll vote to pass this bill because these people who are doing this work should be our highest priority, and we have the money to pay them properly.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've been talking about process for a couple hours now, and I'm trying to think back
you know, to the folks that are that come to my office from the district. And those people that come make the trek here, and it's a hard trek. Even though it's just in West St. Paul or South St. Paul or Mendota Heights, it's a hard trek, particularly when there's snow and frost. But they come year after year, and they've come this year again and again. And they may not be familiar with our rules. They may not be familiar with our process. But they understand the work they do, and I think they want us to understand the work they do. And that work is critical care for folks that we represent. So when we talk about people that need assistance, and that's really what we talk about here, the partisanship, the process, the posturing, we're coming back down to people who need assistance and the people who care for them who don't get paid a heck of a lot. Now, we've helped their pay recently, and this bill clearly helps their pay. Now, I know my district in the South Metro is not that unique. I see an urgency. I think I see an urgency in their eyes when they come to my office. I see an urgency in the photos that were recently posted around our building. And I think that urgency is what's in front of us right now, where we can take action on it. I do have a couple questions. If, Mr. Speaker, if Representative Christensen could yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Mr. Speaker and Representative Christensen, you're also in the South Metro. I'm just wondering, are you seeing constituents come forward looking for an urgency to help with their care and the people who take care of them?
Representative Christensen.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Hansen, I am seeing constituents come forward, and I'm also believe in the process. I believe in vetting the legislation through the committee process and having it go through the process so we can decide how best to serve our constituents and Minnesota families in our districts.
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we heard about process again there, about process and process rather than people. Is Representative Kosnick available for a question?
He's not on the floor.
Let's see, Representative Wills. Mr. Speaker, would Representative Wills yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Wills, South Metro, we're close to each other in Dakota County. What are you seeing from constituents? Are you having people coming forward with urgency in their eyes looking for assistance? Who this bill, House File 564, that provides assistance right away, are you seeing folks coming forward who need that help?
Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hansen. There are several constituents who have come to me in support of this bill, and I think they also understand the work that we do in being very thoughtful and making sure that we respect the process in hearing the bill. And if my memory serves me, last year when we attempted to do the same thing that you're doing now, we brought up the bill at least 5 times, and you voted it down. And I think for the same reason, that you wanted to see it go through the process. So I would ask members to let this go through the process so we can make sure that it does get heard, and I do support the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And
Representative Hansen.
Again, I think back to the people that are coming to our offices that have been here recently, and they will be, I'm sure, coming again if we don't take this action. If we don't take this action today for people, and we'll talk about process again. We'll keep talking about process, but there'll be people that'll be waiting.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've had a long debate, and a lot of it does come back to the process, and a lot of questioning about what that target's going to be for the Health and Human Services budget, and whether it's going to be enough to accommodate Representative Hamilton bill that's before us on this motion, and Representative Schumacher's bill, whether it's going to be able to accommodate that $500 million. So I guess I'd ask Representative Knobloch to yield.
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Knobloch, we could resolve a lot of the issues right here if you could just tell us, you know, I'm sure you know what the target is since it has to come out by next Tuesday. If you could just tell us what the Health and Human Services target is going to be, maybe we can move on and know and be confident there actually is going to be enough money to accommodate Representative Hamilton's bill and Representative Schumacher's bill and Representative Franzen's bill on the CCAP funding and mental health investments and any number of other bills that members on your side of the aisle have. So if you could stand up and assure us, or not assure us, but tell us what that target is going to be, I think that we could save a lot of the consternation that's on the floor right now.
The member from Sherburne, Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Thiessen, I don't yet know the exact target that I'm going to recommend to the committee.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Dean yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dean, I know that you have a bill that would essentially eliminate Minnesota Care in Minnesota. And I just want to be assured, because that's paid, as you know, everybody on the, well, maybe not everybody on the floor, but Representative Dean certainly knows, that's healthcare access fund money that pays for that, that's provided by the provider tax, and was passed into law, and we've been very firm generally in our commitment to make sure that that money is spent on items that are coming from the providers that actually pay the tax. And as you also know, long-term care providers, nursing homes, and other long-term care providers don't provide the provider tax. So I would love to get assurance from you right now that you have no plans on using the health care access fund money to spend on general fund purposes in any budget that you put together, because I'm sure that that's your commitment, and I'm sure that knowing how strongly you feel about the provider tax and how important it is that we keep that money for the purposes that it was raised for, and how much you hate the provider tax, quite frankly, that you're going to honor the commitment that was made to those providers, that that tax would actually be used to support the businesses, essentially, the doctors and the hospitals who are paying that tax.
Representative Dean.
Mr. Speaker and Minority Leader Thiessen, you promised the state of Minnesota that if we expanded Medicaid, that Minnesota, who has always done such a great job of stepping up to the plate, could step back because the federal government was going to come in and take care of that job for us. I remember you saying that. And that we were going to have billions and billions of dollars in savings across the state of Minnesota because the federal government was going to come in here. Minnesota, step aside. You've done a great job. Federal government's going to come in. We've got the ACA now. We've got the ACA, so you can step aside. You can do that, and we won't need that money anymore. Do you remember that, folks, the folks that were here? Your hospitals are going to be taken care of. Minnesota, step aside. Let the federal government and the ACA, Obamacare come in because you've done enough work. Sit down, we're going to come in and take care of this for you. That didn't work out so well, did it? We've got a health care access fund that had, I believe, nearly a projected $700 million budget balance. You stole that money in a one-time shift and shifted that money into the general fund. In the last biennium, Representative Thiessen, in your honest budget without shifts and gimmicks, you shifted that money over, and now it was projected to go below zero, and it is now drained. The hole in the health care access fund is because the federal money did not come in as you said it would, and now we can't afford that program. You bet we are in a state where we cannot afford to cash all of the checks that you wrote in the last 2 years.
Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Dean, for that speech that actually didn't answer the question. And as you know, ironically, that part of that is because premiums in Minnesota under the Affordable Health Care Act were the lowest in the country, and that's why we didn't get those federal reimbursement rates, something you all apparently don't believe. And we actually paid for things that we had always paid for the general fund, Medicaid spending. But you didn't answer my question, and it sounds like you feel incredibly strongly about it, Representative Dean. So I guess I'll ask again, do you have any intention of using the Healthcare Access Fund not to pay for hospitals and doctors and healthcare, basic healthcare, but to use it to spend to support Representative Hamilton's long-term care?
Representative Newberger, for what purpose do you rise?
What are we talking about?
Thank you, Representative Newberger. We are on the suspension of rules. It's a Newton motion to suspend the rules to take up House File 564.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Newberger. And I'm asking these actually are.
Did that answer your question, Representative Newberger?
I know. For now.
Thank you. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the questions are relevant because Representative Knobloch, one of the questions on the floor is whether if we don't declare an urgency right now, there will be money in the targets to be able to afford to pay for the $300 million that Representative Hamilton doesn't even think is enough to pay for these long-term care workers, plus the $200 million that Representative Schumacher thinks is so necessary and probably is in terms of nursing home funding. And I'm trying to understand, since Representative Knobloch won't tell us what that number is and apparently doesn't know the person that's going to be balancing this budget, I'm just asking questions about what he may be planning in terms of how he wants to balance the budget. And I just want to get assurances as we're making this decision, because it is relevant if Representative Dean is going to do some shifts and gimmicks and use money taken from providers that should go to hospitals and clinics and doctors and start to pay for nursing homes and long-term care. If he's going to break that promise that were made with providers so long ago, we should know that so that we could, if he's in fact going to do that, then I would imagine everybody in this room is going to say, boy, oh boy, we had a vote for this Newton motion so that we can actually fund this stuff out of the general fund. So I'd just like to get some assurance from Representative Dean, who I know feels strongly about the Health Care Access Fund, that he is going to use that for the purpose for which the provider tax was passed and not try to shift it to pay for long-term care.
Representative Knobloch, state your point of order.
Mr. Speaker, underneath Mason, Section 114.5, I rise to a point of order that this is very clearly a question as to what course a member proposes to follow, and that is out of order.
Thank you, Representative Knobloch. One moment.
Advice?
Representative Knobloch, I find your point of order well taken. Representative Thiessen.
Mr. Speaker, I would appeal the ruling of the chair and ask for a roll call.
Representative Hortman makes a motion to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call.
Mr. Speaker, Masons is the lowest level.
Representative Hortman.
Advice to the body. Mr. Speaker, members, the authority that governs what happens on the floor of the Minnesota House is first the Constitution, second Minnesota law, third our rules, and fourth custom and usage, and finally Masons. And we do not use Masons to overrule the custom and usage of the House. The custom and usage of the House on issues like this is we often ask about budget targets and how money will be spent and how people intend to divide up budgets. That is the bulk of the work of the House of Representatives, and we have conversations about it. Raising a point of order on that Mason's point defies the custom and usage of this House for the entire 11 years I've been here, and I think your ruling was in error.
Further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 68 ayes and 60 nays, the judgment of the House that it is the judgment of the House that the decision of the Speaker shall stand. Representative Thiessen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, members, what we just voted to do is I can never ask Representative Pepin what what's the agenda is going to be for the next session. No one can ever rise up and ask Representative Knobloch if he's going to take up a particular bill on a later day, because that would be questioning the course that a member is going to take. So we have set a very, very limiting precedent. I know that you all moved to lay my bill on the table, even though it appropriately, although the Speaker ruled otherwise, should have been allowed to go the amendment to the amendment because we were on that. You silenced the minority there. You've risen several times to try to silence the minority over and over again today. I know that you're sensitive. Perhaps you're scared to debate these issues. Representative Knobloch in particular seems to be very scared to debate the issues. I'm not sure what that's about. But members, I'd ask for a call of the House.
Representative Thiessen has moved for a call of the House. Seeing 10 hands, the clerk will take the roll. Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
Representative Knobloch moves that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant at Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. The clerk will close the roll and the Sergeant at Arms will bring in the absent members. Representative Thiessen. Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn until 3:30 p.m. Monday, March 23rd, 2015.
Representative Garofalo moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 3:30 p.m. on Monday, March 23rd, 2015. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion prevails. Further discussion on this motion, on the Newton motion. Seeing none, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 57 ayes and 67 nays, the motion is not adopted.
Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker.
What?
Representative Knobloch.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Mr. Speaker,
Representative
roll
Knobloch
call.
moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor
Mr.
say
Speaker,
aye.
roll call.
Roll call.
Those
Are you
opposed,
kidding
no.
me?
Mr. Speaker,
Mr.
you
The motion prevails. The House stands.
Mr. Speaker,
Are you kidding me, Mr. Speaker?
Mr.
This is
Speaker,
outrageous.
You are rolling over the majority like it is nothing, Mr. Speaker. You are acting like a dictator.
The motion prevails and the House stands adjourned
call.
until 3:30 p.m. Monday, March 23rd, 2015.